Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners.
Greetings to everyone. If this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, thank you for trying something new. I will reiterate, Ben and I are a pair of automotive journalists, but more important than that, we're very good friends. Isn't that right, Ben?
No notes.
No notes on that?
No
Thank
notes on
you. Finally. You can find Ben's work all over the internet. Ben, give him the taste.
You can get a digital taste at Motor Trend, at Capital One Auto Navigator, and at Inside Hook.
And I'll give you a digital taste of the work that I've been writing at driving.ca, autotrader.ca, and Capital One's Auto Navigator as well. Ben, the people want to know, when are we going to start selling them our preamble, our pre-show preamble?
Selling them? I didn't think we were going to be selling it. I'm not even aware that it has a value.
It does not have value to us, but to other people maybe, because people would have heard our very meandering conversation about people like Patrick Stewart, and then books, and then what else was it?
We straight up
Willow
ran
Smith.
through 5 different autobiographies that we had just I believe we talked about Will Smith, Patrick Stewart, Demi Moore, Elliot Page, and Simu Liu.
That was all the ones you were talking about. I talked about Simu Liu, and then DeMar DeRozan.
Yes.
And like you said, Will Smith in there as well.
That's like 6 or 7 autobiographies.
Wow.
It's funny because when I don't know why I feel like this, but I kind of feel like as you get older, you read more autobiographies. And I think the only reason I feel that way is because when I would go to like adults' homes, I love reading. I've been a huge reader my whole life. And so when I would go to other people's homes as a kid, I would always be drawn to their bookshelves, and they were always filled with autobiographies. And because of my age, I had no idea who any of those people were, right? Like when you're a kid, you don't understand that most people write their autobiographies towards the end of their lives. So you probably have no real cultural connection, or even like for sports figures, for example, you haven't seen any of these people in their public role, whether they were on TV or on the playing field or whatever. So now I'm old enough that people I grew up watching are writing their autobiographies because they're way older now. And like Patrick Stewart's like in his 80s, so that's, I guess, one way to measure the stages of life, Sami. I mean, you have a son, and I have autobiographies.
I also have autobiographies.
Yeah, but in the hierarchy of your life, they're just a bit below your son, right?
Yeah, a bit. That's what we talk about before the show starts. We compare notes on our reading about what's going on in the industry as well, all sorts of things.
We did come up with some with a cool topic for the end of the show, which we'll talk about today.
Yeah, and generally it's all of our non-automotive rambling that comes out. Usually doom spiraling about the future, but occasionally we talk about the things that we both enjoy, like reading. Like movies. Some of the movies that Ben has been watching recently made it on a article that you're going to be writing for Haggerty, isn't it?
Yeah, I saw a movie called Hairpin Circus, and it's from 1972, and it's a Japanese street racing movie, and it is absolutely nothing like I expected it to. I don't want to talk about it too much on the show, maybe on a future episode, but just wrote a piece discussing the way it was filmed, the cars that were in it. I will say there's a 2000 GT, like a Toyota 2000 GT in the movie. And it's so crazy to see that car being used by street racers in 1972, because I guess back then it was just another sports car. It's not like the $1 million car that it is today. So this is cognitive dissonance of how it's perceived on screen versus, the lens of time and how that shifted our perception of it.
I mean, it's insane that a 2000 GT is a $1 million car. It was the first Japanese $1 million classic?
I think so. I'm pretty sure it's up at that price range.
Is it the only?
Yes, definitely. Unless you count crazy one-offs. Like I'm sure there's some type of Prince car that, that kind of thing. But the 2000 GT was produced in very, very limited numbers, and it was not exported to North America, as far as I know. So I think that, compared to something like the Cosmo, which was something that more people actually owned, I think that the GT was rarefied air. I think, maybe it wasn't just another sports car in 72. It might be the equivalent of like a classic Lamborghini or something like that. You know, like it's if you had money, you could have it, but it wasn't out of reach at that point because the collector's market hadn't even come close to looking at Japanese cars.
Right. I mean, we talked about like classic cars and valuations kind of being out of whack now. It seems like some of them might be just forms of money laundering, but I think that valuation happened well before this kind of like, however you want to describe it.
And the other thing too about Japanese cars is, especially in that era, older cars did not have value because there were a bunch of regulations and rules that still apply, although they're a little less stringent, that were designed to make it so that if you owned a car in Japan and it got older, it became more expensive to own just in terms of inspections and taxes and that kind of thing, because they were trying to encourage the consumption of new vehicles because they wanted to have a domestic auto industry that they could eventually export to the rest of the world. This is why in countries like Canada, which had the 15-year rule versus the 25-year-old import rule in the United States, why Canada was able to import so many low mileage JDM cars, because the cars would be driven to a point and then basically abandoned. And by abandoned, I mean sold off, traded in, that kind of thing. They would be sent to other countries. A lot of JDM cars ended up in Australia, and a lot of them ended up in India and Africa. I had an acquaintance who lived in Japan, working exclusively in the import-export, and they sent so many vehicles to Africa because of that. And these are vehicles that are in great condition, and there's not anything quote-unquote wrong with them, but people were encouraged to replace them because of the taxation system that existed. So you're in the 70s, and I believe the 2000 GT was like a 67 release or something like that. So that's a 5-year-old car by the time this movie comes out. It's not necessarily something you're going to be keeping around.
That's wild. That's insane to me, but that's the way it worked. Okay.
So
this week we've got some. I've actually got a Toyota to talk about this week.
A newer Toyota. That's where I was.
Probably not nearly as valuable or interesting.
We'll give it some time, Sammy.
Yeah, maybe. And like, what is this now? 80 years later?
80 years from now, when my brain downloads into the dashboard of this Toyota so that it can experience the simulation of driving. I drove the 2025 Toyota Crown. Okay.
Now, this is a car that you've already driven and downloaded your brain into.
But 2 years ago.
Yeah, in the past. And I think you drove a more special version of it. Maybe not more special, a more interesting version of it than I did, which is not to suggest that people should just fast forward to your segment in the podcast.
Yeah, hang up now, delete this episode, go back to 2023.
But I drove the Toyota Limited. The Limited does not use the Hybrid Max powertrain, which is what Ben's tester used.
What does it use?
Over three. It uses a regular hybrid motor, a hybrid powertrain, one that features 236 horsepower, a fairly standard average hybrid powertrain. Basically,
that sounds like the Camry powertrain, is it?
Yeah, almost the same as the Camry. I'm going to double check to see the output is the same between the. I will bring up the Camry. I was going to bring up the Camry.
We love it when you do.
Camry.
Yeah,
the Camry has 232 horsepower with all-wheel drive.
Okay.
So a 4 horsepower difference. Now, the Crown, as we described it, is like a higher end sedan in the Toyota lineup. It looks a little big, but my experience with it suggests that it's not as big as it looks. It drives really well. It's really comfortable. It's loaded with tech. It is pretty. It has a very attractive interior. But every time I was driving this, and I need to mention that the starting price of the Crown is $42,000, and it tops out at around $56,000.
Is that US dollars?
Those are US pricing. And in Canada, I think it's about $10,000 more in each side of things. Like basically, the starting price is I'm in the wrong site here.
I want to just kind of touch on what you just said about its size. Now, I think, and a lot of people think, that the Crown arrived when the Toyota Avalon disappeared, and the Avalon was the full-size sedan in the Toyota lineup. It was kind of a weird product because it wasn't as luxurious as a Lexus, but it had semi-Lexus-like pricing. But it was that big car for an older generation, and when it was gone, Toyota didn't really have anything they could send Camry buyers to. Like, if you still wanted a sedan and you were done with Camry, or it wasn't large enough or comfortable enough for you, you kind of had to look elsewhere. Maybe you went to Lexus, but maybe you couldn't afford that, and you started looking at something like the Maxima, or I don't know, you bought an Impala or something like that. In any case, the Crown comes along, and it feels like, okay, Crown price-wise looks like a replacement for the Avalon, but you're telling me that size-wise, it doesn't necessarily feel as big as it looks?
Yeah, let me talk to you specifically about the dimensions of this car. It is 3 inches longer in length than a Camry. And I need to point out the Camry has been recently redesigned, I think in the past 2 years. It's a fresh design. And I'll also remind you that it's hybrid only now. It's available with all-wheel drive, just like this Crown. And I came away pretty impressed with the Camry, and I think it's a very good sedan. I think both mid-size sedans that you can get from Toyota and Honda, basically the Camry and the Accord, are excellent vehicles and don't need a successor.
And Honda doesn't have one, right? Like Honda's never had a larger car than the Accord.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's totally fine. These are like, I don't know if you'd call them end game cars, but these are cars that probably you can be happy with and not need to graduate into a luxury or a larger vehicle. I think they're plenty spacious enough, which is why the Crown is even more confusing to me. Like I mentioned, lengthwise, the difference is 3 inches. Widthwise is about the same. And height-wise, it's a tiny bit taller, I believe. I'm going to double check. I think it's taller. And otherwise, I even found the interiors to be, it's about 4 inches taller. And I will say the interior dimensions of these two cars are almost identical, like maybe less than half an inch in any way, in either way, in terms of headroom, legroom, front, rear, and even cargo space. There's 15.1. Is it 15 or 13? Let me double check. 15.1 cubic feet of storage space in the Camry and 15.2 cubic feet of storage space in the Crown.
And so the Crown has a trunk, right? It's not a hatchback, despite
it looks like it would be a hatchback, but it's not.
It's actually a fastback.
It is a fastback design. I found the latch for the Crown to be really frustrating to find. Like it's a little button that's hidden under a ledge, and I keep thinking, if you look at the rear end of the Crown, it looks like it should just have like a button. Like there's no button area. Like there's no space for
it's just smooth.
It's just fairly smooth. And so my first instinct was to maybe reach for it near the license plate holder. Sometimes I think the Ford Mustang has like a trunk release button down there, and it was not down there. You just end up getting your hands dirty. The trunk button is somewhere near the W in Crown, just above that, and it's hidden underneath this light bar. It's something that I really struggle to kind of like find naturally. Anyways, only because you were talking about the trunk space, and I imagined that this car would have a ton of trunk space, and it really did. It had plenty for my stroller and for my baby needs. And we even we stayed at my parents' place, so we have to bring all of our stuff, or like luggage or whatever you want to call it. And the Crown was really well suited for all of that, and it fit 3 adults in it and a rear facing baby seat.
And I think stylistically too, it is much more attention getting than the Camry. It kind of looks like a larger version of the Prius, the same styling language as the Prius.
No, I think the new Prius is really attractive looking. I don't see the Prius design. Maybe the old Prius design language is a little bit in here.
Just totally shooting me down here.
I don't like it. I don't think it's a pretty car. I think they've also
I didn't say
done
it was pretty. I said it was attention getting.
I don't know about that. They done some weird things with the color. Yeah, they did some weird things with like the two-tone element. It's got like a splash guard kind of thing on the side profile. It's got like this blacked out front grille. You can get models that have more blacked out elements on the rear where the trunk is.
Is this a sedan or a crossover in Toyota's eyes?
It looks like I think they're treating it like a sedan, and it's got like, some trims, like the platinum trim has like fender, what looks like mud guards or cladding, right? And I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how to like visualize this car like a tweener, but as I mentioned, size-wise, it's super close to what you'd find in a Camry. And I keep wondering when a Camry can be had for just over $20,000 or under 30, easily under 30. and this car starts at 40, there's a problem. I think that this is not a necessary car to sell to people. I don't think they will do a good job selling it to people. I don't think that people want this car, as we already noticed with the Avalon disappearing because its clients were running thin.
But running thin, you mean filling graveyards. Let's not.
Sure. And
I say that as someone whose family members did own Avalons, so like multiple Avalons.
And you just can't help. You can't help but wonder what's going on in Toyota's head here, especially because could this have been a Lexus? There's a Lexus sedan that disappeared without much fanfare, the GS.
Yeah.
And this could have maybe been a GS, although the GS was more like sporty, I suppose.
I mean, I don't think you would have had to have positioned it as a GS replacement. Like, I think you could have still called it the Lexus Crown, right?
Okay.
Although Lexus doesn't really do names, so maybe not. The Lexus CX, let's say.
Okay.
I don't think that it has to fill the same. The GX was sort of a performance sports sedan when it first came out, and then it faded sedan from that. And it was like a 5 Series equivalent that never really filled that role. So I think that if you just look at it from a size perspective, you could say, okay, Crown slots in above ES, but then from all the measurements you're saying, it's only barely bigger than an ES. So what's the point, really? You know, I guess easier to sell that type of pricing. They would have had to put a different interior in it. And of course, you need that Mark Levinson stereo system.
Yes.
But I don't know. It does kind of feel out of step with almost everything else that Toyota is selling. And until you look at the SUV side, and then you realize that I think at the top of Toyota's, when Toyota gets out of its affordable offerings, which are, you know, generally reasonably priced, like RAV4, Camry, Prius, Corolla, there are affordable versions of all of those cars.
Yeah.
Then you get to, say, the SUV side. The Sequoia, the Land Cruiser. These are vehicles...
And we talked about the Crown Signia as well.
Sure, but these are cars that are not reasonably or even competitively priced. Mm-hmm. They're extremely... You can pay a lot of money for a Land Cruiser. Even to get in the door, you're paying a lot of money for a Land Cruiser. But the Sequoia, like, there are trim levels that I think are $70,000. You know, maybe even 80. And that's not a prestigious vehicle or an automobile that's really selling to anyone other than repeat buyers, I think.
Yeah.
So Toyota has this disconnect that you mentioned, and I think it applies to the top of their the top of their vehicle lineup. And you have this Crown come in, and I'm sure there are people in Toyota who are proud of the Crown, and they're like, "This is a great vehicle. We can easily ask X amount of money for it." And I think that decision happens in the absence of like any market analysis. Like, it's just a total vacuum. They drop the Crown in, and they're like, "This is our expensive car. Buy it if you want."
But it's even more difficult for a Toyota to justify that when anybody can look at a Lexus and say that's the same price. And you can easily get a Lexus for this price, right? Yes, as we mentioned.
Yeah, of course.
And so what is the point of this? Is it just, like you said, graduating, you know, you want to stay with the same financer
and who's it
same dealership?
With?
Yeah. I don't think Maxima is a thing anymore.
It's still out there. Barely.
Is it,
but
is it a new product?
No, it's not. So in reality, I can't think of another mainline automaker in North America that sells a full-size sedan. Unless we're talking about like Chrysler. Do they still sell the 300? I don't know.
No, but there's a Dodge. I think they're making the Dodge Challenger and what is it? Challenger Daytona? Charger Daytona?
The 4-door has not come out yet.
It's supposed to.
I know, but it hasn't. And this vehicle predates it by 2 years. So like they're missing the mark there.
But yeah, I don't know where you're going to find I mean, is that the point? Is that this is a market that has no other cars and Toyota will sell you one for whatever price they determine?
Maybe.
And you're so desperate for a non-Camry, non-mainstream.
It's like you got a disease and the only cure is a slightly bigger Toyota. Like that's
exactly.
I don't know. It's weird. I personally am into the styling in more than you are.
Yeah.
So I see it as a play if you're trying to get a more extroverted Toyota. But there are other ways to do that. And there are other options. As you mentioned, Lexus is out there too. And then you start looking at Acura. I mean, even in the luxury brands. I'm sorry?
The Acura TLX?
I don't know if it's the same size. I think TLX is maybe a little bit smaller.
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head. That's just how it feels. But yeah, it's a pseudo full-size sedan that isn't really.
Now, while most of the things that I would say about this car are probably close to what Ben mentioned in his review of it, I found it to be really smooth riding. I was happy with the ride quality of it. But my major issues that I had while driving it involved the infotainment system. And I like to point out that I never know whether or not this is my fault or the car's fault. But wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, or in my case, wireless Android Auto, did not work consistently. There were some times where it told me upon starting it that wireless Android Auto could not be started. Please use the USB cable. And then it worked anyways. And then other times it would tell me that, and I would use the USB cable and nothing happened. So I don't know what's going on with the Android Auto implementation in the Crown that I had, but it was really hit or miss. And I had to rely a couple of times on the built-in navigation system, which was fine. But I'm a sucker for what I'm used to. All my destinations and apps and music are on Android Auto, so sure. I want to use that.
And we move cars so often that it's nice to have at least one touch point of familiarity that we can go back to. I mean, we test out all these aspects of the new infotainment system, but if you need to get somewhere and you haven't had time to learn this yet, it's nice to be able to just pop in Android Auto and get to your destination and not have to be concerned that you entered in things wrong or you're going to have some kind of, you don't understand how the guidance works, that kind of thing. Not every situation is a testing situation, I guess is what I'm getting to.
Yeah. So, I mean, I will say the experience was fairly fine. It was okay with the exception of the infotainment system not working on my end there. But again, I every time I stepped into this thing, I kept wondering, is this just like the Camry, but a different shape and size and a different price point? The interesting thing I'll point out is that having driven the Crown Signia, I much preferred the Crown Signia to this, which felt more like a wagon than it does an SUV. And the interior design of these two cars is almost identical. They have the same interior design language in terms of where they put controls and buttons and just the way their materials look and feel. And I appreciated that kind of consistency between two cars. A sub-brand basically is happening here with Crown and Crown Signia. And I thought that was cool, but I don't know how effective that will be. Like I having seen it, I get it, but I don't think it matters. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a niche within a niche almost.
Yeah. That's all I got to say about this. I know it's a short take, but I would recommend anybody who's who is interested in the Crown Signia to save some money and check out a Camry instead, or an Accord. And anybody who wants to get something more fancier than those to take a look at one of the luxury models instead of a mainstream model, because I think there's some sedans in various automakers that are really competitive and really good. And I think you can get away with that much better.
All right. So I drove something that we've also talked about on the show before, but I haven't driven it in a very long time. And that's the Honda Pilot, 2025 Honda Pilot. And specifically, I drove the TrailSport version of the Pilot. Sami, I know that you've driven the Pilot like 3 times in the last 6 months, if my memory serves.
It feels like it.
And were any of those TrailSports?
Yeah, it was a bright blue TrailSport. Okay. I don't know if you had the same trim.
I had a light blue TrailSport.
Light blue, yes.
Just to get out of
your first time with this generation of Pilot?
It might be. I don't remember the last time I drove a Pilot. It's tough. I've driven a Passport more recently. Mm-hmm. I don't think I drove the TrailSport version. For those of you who are unfamiliar, TrailSport is like Honda's Wilderness, except it's a little bit more hardcore. It gives you an extra inch of ground clearance. You get knobby tires. There's actually skid plates under the car, steel skid plates. And the suspension has been retuned for off-road use. They also do some software voodoo with the all-wheel drive. Now, I don't think any of that matters. I'm not sure how many people are selecting a TrailSport to actually go off-road, or if they are interested in a vehicle this large to go off-road, because this thing is bulky. And that is my biggest impression of the Pilot is just how big it feels, Sami. Does that jive with your experience?
Yeah, it felt big in a way that a 3-row sometimes doesn't feel that big. I mean, especially compared to, let's say, the one of the more popular 3-rows, which is the Toyota Highlander, it felt bigger than a Highlander, even though I think dimensionally it's the same. And it just, I don't know, there's something really bulky and cumbersome about the Pilot, in my experience.
Cumbersome,
especially with the TrailSport model.
Cumbersome's a good word for it. It comes with a 285 horsepower V6 and a 10-speed automatic, and obviously all-wheel drive, right? And what I was the main impression given off by the drivetrain is that it's overtaxed by the Pilot. And I don't mean like the Pilot feels slow, but it just kind of felt like off the line or going up a hill that engine was really working hard to get you where you're going.
This is a new engine, brand new engine. It is the same size and output as the outgoing Pilot's engine, which is always a concern. But there was something about it that, like, you put your foot down and it just takes a second to deliver.
Yeah, it's like, are you sure? Are you really sure? And then you have to stay in the throttle to be like, yeah, I'm sure, Honda, we're gonna do this, and then maybe.
And you hear it, right? You hear it before it does anything.
You definitely hear it. It's not an unpleasant sound, but you do notice the engine pretty much at all times, especially when you're below like 30 miles an hour. That's where I really noticed it the most. But I think that some of that bulky feel, at least from the handling perspective, comes from those knobby tires.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah,
they're not amazing. I mean, they're designed to do something that you're probably not going to do, which is throw mud around or whatever. And the vehicle looks okay. I find that the TrailSport treatment is fine. You get some interior callouts with some coloring on the seats and whatnot. And I believe the floor mats and door panels a little bit. I don't remember exactly the door panels, but you do see the TrailSport branding inside the vehicle. So you always know that you're driving a TrailSport. And it comes with, I guess, technology that you would use if you got stuck somewhere. But I drove it mostly on the melting dirt roads that are around me and in a bit of a snowstorm. So I was dealing with squishy terrain more than tough terrain. And I had no problems with it. It at no point did it feel. Remember how I had that issue with the EX30 where it felt like the all-wheel drive was not consistent, like it was a slip and grip. And I didn't really get that with the TrailSport. So kudos to the tuning on the all-wheel drive system. It was relatively comfortable for a vehicle that's had its suspension system reconfigured for tough stuff. It didn't really bounce around a lot on me, even on some of the ruts and sinkholes that I'm dealing with right now because of the spring thaw. It felt okay. There's a lot of room inside of it. I picked up my wife at the airport after she'd been gone to Malaysia for 2 weeks for business purposes. And she had a lot of luggage and it just went in there, no problem. I will say, though, that my 2004 Subaru Impreza also swallowed the same amount of luggage when I was headed to the airport. But on the way home, I would not have been able to use it because the trunk stopped opening on the Impreza.
Okay.
So I can't use the key, and the inside release doesn't seem to do anything on cold days. So anyway, tagging in the Pilot to get that job done. Okay. In terms of fuel mileage, I saw 20 miles per gallon round trip. I did a lot of highway with this thing.
That's not very good.
It's not, but it's not far off of what I looked at what Car and Driver got on their Pilot TrailSport, which seemed the least aerodynamic and the grippiest tires, I guess you could say. And they got 22 miles per gallon in the summer. So I'm getting 20 miles per gallon in the winter, which is, I believe, 11.7 liters per 100 kilometers. That's pretty decent for the cold weather that I dealt with, like, below freezing, around freezing. I can't be super mad at that for how big the vehicle is. I'm not impressed with it, but for the capabilities that it offers in terms of how many people you can haul around, it has decent towing. That's fuel mileage that I'm not going to get upset with.
Okay. So did you get to see how the second seats and third row seats are? And
I did not use the third row. I kept the third row folded.
And I can't remember if this version of the Pilot had the removable middle seat in the second row.
Ooh, I didn't see it.
Okay.
From what I remember, it was
probably
it was a 2-2 setup.
Okay.
I could be wrong though. I used the second row for not for seating but for storage, for hauling stuff. I did not.
Tons of space, right?
I was by myself for most of the time during the week I had this vehicle, despite the airport run. So that meant that I didn't really get the chance to test out how other people dealt with the seats while it was in motion. It was mostly just me being back there.
Okay. Excuse me.
I was looking at how the Pilot felt as a daily driver. And, I think you can use something like the TrailSport as a daily. It's going to be a compromise because of the tires. It's going to be a compromise because of the size, and it's going to be a compromise because of the fuel economy. So you have to ask yourself, is it better for me to buy an off-road toy? You know, it's the same question as you're going to the track. Does your daily driver need to be the car you have at autocross on the weekend? Is that the car you want to be putting on a road course? When you have a vehicle as large as the Pilot, how much fun can you really have off-road? Like, are you going to take it camping? In which case, okay, I get it, because there's tons of room inside and you can put all your camping gear and bring friends, and it's going to be good for that. And you probably won't get stuck on a muddy road. But if you're going to be driving on the trail, I don't know if the TrailSport's really, despite the name, is really what you want. And you might be better off buying like a cheap Jeep, an older vehicle or something like that, and just going for it that way.
Yeah, but you can't put that many. I mean,
well, that's what I'm saying. If you're just off-roading for yourself, like,
yeah, if you're just off-roading for yourself, I think this is supposed to be a family, quote-unquote, adventure vehicle. It is meant for a family going camping.
But some people might buy it because they need a family vehicle and they want to individually do off-roading.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay.
Because, I mean, when you go to the racetrack, you don't take your family out on the track with you. And I think there are some people who don't take their family on the trail. I think they use it as an escape.
Okay, gotcha. I can see that. I also think...
I mean, Sammy, you take your family out there in your heart.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
I don't want to...
I bring my family everywhere.
I don't want to downplay that.
In my heart. One of the things that I thought about was the Pilot. I think the Pilot, you might have to really correct me here if I'm really off base, but I think it has one of the higher tow ratings in its class. Maybe Telluride has more, but I think
it's 5,000 pounds if you get all-wheel drive. It's 35.
That sounds pretty good.
It's 3,500 if you don't. The highest in its class would be the Durango, which is just under 9,000.
Oh, but the Durango feels like a different class of car altogether. Sometimes.
Yeah, but I think Telluride and Grand Highlander match the Pilot.
Okay.
So it's not super capable. It's fine. I mean, that's not nothing, right? One other thing to keep in mind is price on this vehicle. The base version of the Pilot's 41 grand US. The Sport, there's no LX anymore. They got rid of that for this year. So that's fine. You know, I think that's actually, for a vehicle of this size, that's not a terrible price. But the TrailSport is $10,000 more. Yeah. And if you want to there's a black edition for another $5 grand. So once you get to TrailSport, your choices are Touring, which is like $2 grand less and gives you equipment. And then there's Elite, which is $4 grand more and gives you luxury. And then there's Black Edition, which is another $5 grand on top of TrailSport. And that's just kind of a styling exercise based on the Elite, right? In Canada, the TrailSport starts at $62,000. That is a lot of money.
I looked this up, and the average price of a new car is around 60 grand now in Canada. I know that doesn't mean much, but...
I mean, average is... What's the median price? You have that number?
I think it's around the same thing as well.
I don't see how that's mathematically possible, but okay.
It's similar.
In any case, I find 62 is a lot for this vehicle. I would be happier buying a less expensive Canadian TrailSport. Or sorry, Canadian Pilot. And I'm going to tell you how much less expensive. Ooh, 55,000. So there's that's
EXL?
That's the base Sport.
Oh, you're crazy.
So
really?
It's only a $6,000, well, about a $6,500 difference in Canada between TrailSport and Sport itself. So yeah, that's a fairly the difference in the US between Sport and TrailSport is much greater.
Give me that pricing difference again one more time. What are the starting prices?
So in the United States, a base Pilot is 41 grand and a TrailSport is 50. So that's a difference of 9 grand. But in Canada, a base Pilot Sport is 55 and the TrailSport is 61.8. So it's about $6,500 difference Canadian dollars, which is like 4,000 US. So the differential between the two is half what it is in the United States. That I don't get.
Okay, talk to me for a second here, because in my feelings on this class of vehicle, I would put Kia Telluride up there in the segment. I think that's if it was my money, I was going to spend on one of these cars. It would probably be my first choice would be a Kia dealership and taking a look at the Kia Telluride, which starts at including destination and all that jazz is 54 grand.
I think part of the difference in Canada for the the reason why it's so much more expensive is you can't get a front wheel drive Pilot. Whereas in the US, you can get a front wheel drive Sport.
Am I off base by suggesting that the Kia is still a better pick?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it feels less bulky and the styling is more appealing to some people, but there's no off-road version. I mean, is there an X Pro Telluride?
Yeah, I just saw it. Give me a minute. I think it might be an X Line rather than an X Pro.
And if there is an X Pro, I don't think.
Oh no, there is an X Pro, but it's not
as hardcore.
No, not at all.
Whatever.
Just all-terrain tires
for values of hardcore that apply to a Honda unibody crossover, right? Like that's
yeah. Okay. That's a. I mean, it lines up with what I had experienced with my various testing of the Pilot, which was it's good, not great.
Yeah, it's fun.
Kind of expensive.
It's there, you know. But I want to say, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the Forester, right, and how the Forester doesn't really stand out, but it's something you can recommend anyway.
Sure.
We had that kind of vibe from it, where it does a lot of things perfectly fine. The pricing is reasonable. And it has the standard all-wheel drive. And so I can recommend the Forester to people who are, need a bigger Crosstrek. But for the Pilot, especially the TrailSport, it's a lot harder for me to just say, yeah, definitely go for it. I would say drive a couple other things as well. Because the quirks of the Pilot in terms of its drivetrain that I described, just how it feels and how it feels like it's working pretty hard, you're not going to experience that with some other vehicles. And that might not bother you, or it might. You just need to know before you spend all the money.
I know this is going to come across as really dumb to say, but there was an element when I was driving the Pilot where I was like...
A Honda element?
No, yes, true. There was a point when I was driving the Pilot where if I had to go and run out and do like an errand, I would wait till I had a couple of errands to do before going out in it, because I found it too cumbersome and like lazy to drive that I didn't enjoy driving it. And I know that might sound like, oh, he's just an enthusiast who wants to drive a fun to drive car, but there's other cars that feel like really natural. You can just hop in, start driving and come back, and you can do it again 10 times in a day. But there was something about the size and the I don't know, the responsiveness of the Pilot that didn't connect with me, and I just felt like, no, I don't want to do it just now. I don't want to drive this right now.
Now, I will counter that with the fact that when I had to do my airport run to pick up my wife, I had to choose between the Crosstrek, which gets way better fuel mileage, or the Pilot. Yeah. And I chose the Pilot for comfort reasons. I thought it would be quieter. I thought it would be easier to load gear into. And I just thought it would be an overall less of a... Just a more insulated experience. And I paid more in gas to over 3 hours of driving to do that. So that was my choice that I made. But I understand what you're saying. Like, if I was in a city and I had to drive the Pilot everywhere, that would be a hassle. Just because of its size alone. Like going to get groceries, hassle. Going to a restaurant, hassle. That's
exactly
doing whatever it is I do in the city that I'm not going to talk about on the air, hassle. So like, I totally get that you would want to bundle all those hassles into one mega hassle and then stuff it in the big cargo area of the Pilot.
Exactly. That was my approach. Now, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about this week, and it involves one of our favorite subjects on the podcast, the car company known as Fisker.
Oh, Fisker.
Fisker is the second or third automotive venture by designer Henrik Fisker. Henrik Fisker.
His friends call him Henry, but I don't think he's a friend of the podcast.
No, he's not. It's also the latest one that's gone bankrupt.
Oof.
Just after delivering a fairly interesting electric vehicle known as the Ocean. How this is left, and I mean, this car has just hit, like, literally was on the market, I think 2023, 24, and then the company went bankrupt.
And prices have just cratered. Like, you can get them for $20,000, and I think they were selling for $60,000 new.
Yes.
Because everyone is scared of an EV that no longer has factory support, which I completely understand.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to get it fixed? And not only that, but like, this is an all new vehicle. I mean, the parts are not off the shelf, GM or Toyota parts that you can get. They
Fisker's more of an empty shelf operation.
Yes. And you also think of like different infrastructure for or integration for software, how it works. I've heard a lot of like recurring issues that are mostly software based in it, because as a modern electric vehicle, it just has a massive touchscreen for many of its controls and functions. I've heard that the car is actually kind of interesting when it is working, but that there are a lot of bugs that really ruin the ownership experience.
That's like having a friend who's fun to be around when they're not drinking.
Yeah, that's very true. However, there is a group of Fisker owners that are concerned about, like you said, how do you own a car which has no support network? What do you do when the vehicle needs repairs, needs service, needs something, and there is no automaker around to do it? Well, Ben, have you heard of something called the holder rule? Because you just explained this to me.
I have.
And
so it turns out that in the United States, there's a very interesting piece of legal jargon that's called the holder rule. And what it allows consumers to do is, if you finance a purchase and something happens to that purchase, you can pursue the bank of that financed the purchase just as strongly as you would pursue the manufacturer of that product. So in this case, if you financed your Fisker through their financial partner Chase Bank, you can go after Chase for whatever damages you feel you're entitled to because Fisker went out of business, because you can't go after Fisker. Like, they're done.
They don't have anything. They don't have anything left.
So as a result, Chase,
there is a class action lawsuit, right?
That's what I was going to say. Chase has become embroiled in a class action lawsuit that you wouldn't think they'd be involved in, because Chase doesn't own Fisker. They just happen to be their financier. And they've been pulled into this class action lawsuit. And as a result of their involvement, a really unique set of circumstances has appeared where if you own a Fisker, you can choose to be compensated in the form of a discount on a Rivian electric vehicle. Sami, tell me more about this really unusual operation that's going on.
You may sell your vehicle to Rivian for a fixed price. Okay. You may trade your vehicle to Rivian for the same price and also receive incentives for the purchase or lease of a new Rivian vehicle. Or if your vehicle is inoperable or quote unquote bricked and can't be repaired, Chase will purchase your vehicle from you from a fixed rate. Okay. In each case the fixed price will be an amount equal to the purchase price minus, some sort of
depreciation.
Depreciation, yeah.
So the reason Rivian is involved, because Rivian has nothing to do with Fisker, but
yeah, it's not like all the electric vehicle startups.
Yeah, it's not just one company. It's not like Hendrik Fisker had his hands in all of these startups, but Chase happens to be the financier for Rivian. So I think Chase was like, what are we going to do? Because we don't want to fight this necessarily. We don't want a long lawsuit. This is a really complicated situation. They decided to, I guess, push business towards Rivian, because if part of this is like, if you're getting a discount, if you're trading in your Fisker for a Rivian and then you finance with Chase is basically double dipping. Like they're getting let off the hook of the financial obligations under this Holder Act, but they're also getting the financial profits that come with servicing the loan for the new Rivian. So they're assuming, I guess the gamble is that a large number of Ocean, there's not a large number of Ocean owners.
No.
A high enough percentage of Ocean owners are going to choose to buy a Rivian because they'd rather not walk, and then Chase is going to get their business. This is like a fascinating thing that has happened, and I think no one's really reporting on this. I'm not seeing, people are talking about the trade-in, but they're not talking about why it's happening. So I just thought that was a really obscure aspect of consumer protection law that I've never heard of before.
I think that's really weird. I want to point out that the apparently just over 10,000 Fisker Oceans were made, and apparently less than half of them actually got delivered to
So where
customers.
are the other half?
I don't know, but I see a couple on my like morning commute.
Oh yeah, it's the most optimistic people you've ever seen.
I love it.
Behind the wheel.
I think it's a really cool looking car. I think I'm always impressed by how not sweaty the driver is, because if it was me, I'd be terrified that every pothole can damage these really unique, bespoke steering wheels.
But Sami, you know why you sleep well at night? Because you know that Chase has your back. And if anything gets damaged, you could just walk into any Chase bank location and they'll give
Just
you a
give it
new
back to
rim.
them.
They'll give you a new rim. They're in a different. They have a secondary line of business now, and that's satisfying upset Fisker Ocean customers.
I think that's unbelievable. I think that's really optimistic. I think that's really unique. I've never heard of this, and we've heard of automakers going out of business before. But
now, could I buy a bricked Fisker Ocean and then use it as like a discount card on a new Rivian? Can I show up? Can I show up at a Rivian dealership with a bricked Fisker Ocean on a flatbed and be like, I want 50% off?
Yeah,
and
I would love to see you try.
I paid like $2,000 for this Fisker Ocean.
Yeah, that's probably what will most likely happen.
I'm into it. There needs to be a clearinghouse. I mean, you could just go to wherever they're parking the 5,000 unsold Oceans. You know, why not?
I think it's a really cool car. I really wish that this was more successful because it was totally strange. It had way too many windows. It had.
You're always saying that.
Yeah, there's not enough windows in my cars. It had a infotainment screen that rotated. I think like
rotated how?
It rotated from landscape to portrait.
Okay, so my whole life, computer companies have been promising that I could do that easily with like a display in my own home. And since as a writer, a taller than it is wide display is very convenient for editing, I've never successfully achieved this. I've never found one where it was convenient to do. Like all
tablets are the best at that. But
but I'm not writing on a tablet. I'm not a masochist. I'm not going to be like pounding a screen for like anyway. They never
get a Bluetooth keyboard.
Oh wow! So I could get the world's worst keyboard to go with the world's worst writing setup.
Yeah, but at least you have the vertical.
Yeah, that I have to hold in front of me while I use the. Anyway, the stands that you get. The stands that you get for LED screens, they're never tall enough to properly use them in portrait form.
Yeah.
Because screens are so big these days.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, I guess you could suspend it from the ceiling with chains.
I believe a lot of people use mounts, like these weird desk mounts.
I just have an open space that leads directly out into my living room.
Yeah.
So it's not possible.
Okay. Anyways, this allowed you to I guess watch a movie or something on the whatever the infotainment system is on the Fisker when you're charging it. When you're charging it, but imagine that you rotate your screen one too many times, the mechanism breaks, you're out of luck.
Now
man.
you have to hold the screen
yeah.
in your hand while you're driving, and then Sammy's like, "Why don't you just get a Bluetooth keyboard?" And you're right back at square one.
If you think if the listener thinks my suggestions are off base and that Ben should not be using a Bluetooth keyboard, they can get in touch with me or Ben through the internet by going to our website, unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. There's a contact form there. You fill that out with all of your suggestions on how Ben can solve his vertical screen mounting system, and it lands in our inbox. We love that. Additionally, you can reach out to us on social media. I think the ideal social media for us right now is Instagram. You can find Ben at Hunting Benjamin, or you can find me at Sami _ha like you're laughing. Or you can find us on Blue Sky. Ben is at Hunting Benjamin, and I'm Sami -ha ha like you're laughing.
Dash, not underscore. Don't get it twisted.
What else are we doing? Yes.
Well, I mean, if you want to subscribe, like, review, you can do that on your podcatcher, Unnamed Automotive Podcast, or you can go to unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. Sami, you mentioned the contact form that's there.
Yep.
Did you mention the email?
Oh, you can email us the old-fashioned way. It's benjamin@benjaminhunting.com.
Yeah, and if any chance you get to let other people know that this podcast exists, we would appreciate it. It's always helpful to kind of expand the audience and get more people on the Unnamed Automotive Podcast train. Sami, what are you going to be talking about next week?
I don't have a new vehicle to talk about next week, but I do have some interesting news things that I would love to bring up. Some things that have been going on the first quarter of the year, and I thought you'd be interested in sharing.
Tuning out.
Oh, come on now.
No new car.
What about
you?
Speak
from Sami. I'll be talking about a new car, the BMW 550e. Which is a plug-in hybrid that replaces not just the previous plug-in version of the 5 Series, but also the 550, the V8 version. That's gone now as far as I know, and instead you have this turbocharged straight 6 with the battery pack. So it'll be an interesting conversation.
Okay, I'm looking forward to having it with you because I think those are always really good conversations. Every week is a pretty good conversation.
Oh, Sami, you're too kind. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening.
All right, bye everyone.